Welcome back to the New Quantum Era, the podcast where I speak with the pioneers who are propelling the field of quantum information science and technology forward. I'm your host, Sebastian Hassinger, and I've got a really interesting conversation again for you in this episode. I had a great time talking to my guests. I spoke with Mark Luo, co-founder and CEO of Quantum Brilliance, and Brian Wong, who's just joined as their independent board chair. And so Quantum Brilliance is another hardware vendor, one of the many who've been popping up over the number of years. But the interesting thing about them is they're actually the first hardware vendor I've spoken to who are pursuing the modality of diamond nitrogen vacancy qubits. So quite a different modality than the superconducting and neutral atom and trapped ion modalities we've spoken to, and even different from spin qubits like C12 or Dirac, we've had conversations with, or the photonic qubits as well. So you'll learn a bit about how these types of qubits work, what these devices are, their applications in computing and in sensing. And also, Brian, like myself, is not from the physics world. He's much more of a veteran, emerging technology sort of entrepreneur, more on the technical side, but he has a lot of business experience. He's raised a ton of capital for a number of different startups over his career. And so it was really interesting. I think one of the key challenges for quantum computing in general is bridging the gap between the curiosity-driven science research from which all of these incredible findings have emerged and still remains a critical component of the overall development of the space, but bridging that science world with the engineering and technology and business acumen it takes to bring products to market and find the market opportunity that matches with the capabilities of the technology you've developed. So that's incredibly challenging. It's still obviously in the early days. The technologies we have today are still experimental, but the sooner we start wrapping our heads around what those business challenges are going to be, those go-to-market challenges, those product market fit challenges, the ease of use, the scalability, the supply chain, the lower the risks are going to be as the technology matures. I think Brian spoke to that point very, very interestingly and effectively. So let's get right to the conversation. I hope you enjoy the episode and you learn as much as I did about this modality of diamond-based qubits. Excellent. Thank you very much for joining, Brian and Mark. I really appreciate your time. I'm really excited about the conversation today because I've covered a lot of different modalities of qubits, but nothing to do with nitrogen vacancy qubits. Quantum Brilliance, of course, a pioneer in that space. Mark, you're a co-founder of the company. Can you start by sort of walking us through what is a nitrogen vacancy and how does it create the conditions for being a qubit?
Absolutely. So nitrogen vacancy used as a quantum defect for quantum technology has been around for 20 plus years. Essentially, how it operates is the spin uses a nitrogen atom and a vacant space next to it, which in itself creates a spin. And the benefit of using synthetic diamond for these MV centers as your quantum bits is that it can operate under not only under room temperature, but a lot of the complex control electronics or cryogenics, complex lasers and vacuum chambers are not necessary because it inherently is a very stable qubit. And the reason for its stability is diamond is a very rigid material. So the thermal energy to cause decoherence has to be quite high. So consequently, that's why a lot of that complexity can be removed. And in addition to that, the other benefit is you can really achieve miniaturization, where you can actually bring a quantum system down to a very small size. So, for example, Bosch developed a diamond quantum sensor that is the size of a credit card. Our quantum computer that we deployed to Oak Ridge National Lab is a 19 track that is 6U tall, operating at 300 watts. So you end up with a quantum device that is room temperature, small in size, weight, and power, and easy to integrate in all types of complex environments.
That's amazing. And so diamond is it's a, as you said, it's a very rigid grid of carbon atoms, right? So is one of those carbon atoms is literally missing out of the matrix and is replaced with a nitrogen atom. Is that right?
Yeah, so the way it works is basically you've got carbon atoms, and right next to it is replaced with a nitrogen. Then
Hmm.
there's an empty space next to it, and that gives you your MV spin.
I see. I see. The nitrogen atom creates the geometry that creates an empty space, and so that empty space is actually where the two-level system is that supports the computation.
That's
That's
correct.
really
Yeah,
interesting.
and
And
it's
then
not.
you're in.
So you go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's not only used in computation, but it can also be used for sensing as well as a system. And that's really because it really has this ability to get to very high sensitivity using the same quantum spin as well.
And sensitivity, what types of energies? What's it able to sense?
Yeah, so you got assemble nitrogen vacancy centers and single MV. So the main difference is assemble MV has hundreds and thousands of these MVs that's laid across,
Right.
uh, not evenly distributed, but at a level of density. That gets you to picotesla to even hundreds of femtotesla sensitivity that's been proven. Then you got the single nitrogen vacancy center. It's used for quantum microscopes, and
Hmm.
that can get to nanotesla, picotesla level sensitivity, and then you can use it for nanoscale MRI to
Hmm.
magnetometer for GPS-free navigation, to even things like growing brain chips. Growing brain cells on diamond chips in
Hmm.
order to detect electric currents for different drug profiling candidates. So that's what's it's been used for sensing.
That's incredible. And so the interaction with those qubits, with those two-level systems, that's all photonica. It's just lasers, as you said.
So for these quantum systems, the way it operates is that the way you initialize it is you have a green light that is used. You shine a green light, and the MV observes that energy. It then emits a red light that
Hmm.
depends on its quantum spin state. You can read the light using two techniques. One is using photonics. The second one is using detecting electrons. So one is called ODMR. The second one is called PDMR. And the main difference between these two different techniques really comes down to how you want to think about packaging as well as increasing for different environments. You want ODMR versus PDMR. So what our company has really pioneered is using PDMR because we can see how you can miniaturize that quantum package down to very small form factors.
Hmm. That's really cool. And I assume it's still the one of those two systems or control means are used to entangle two qubit operations.
Yeah, that's correct. So your entanglement that you use is effectively for quantum computing. It's dipole-dipole coupling, where you try and get the magnetic interaction. And so yeah, you can achieve entanglement with this quantum system as well.
Hmm. That's really cool. In terms of, I've heard that one of the challenges in the sort of the early days of the exploration of this modality was fabrication. It was sort of, I think, at some point. maybe 4 or 5 years ago, somebody described to me the fabrication method as sort of a shotgun blast, and not very precise placement of the vacancies. But that's something that Quantum Brilliance has really had some incredible advancements around the placement of the actual vacancies, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we really focused on 6 years ago when we built the company, which was we looked at what was the critical bottleneck behind being able to achieve either higher sensitivity in quantum sensing or creating scalable qubits using this material. And you are exactly right. I think one of the main challenges is the way these quantum diamonds are being produced today. It looks nothing like what happens in semiconductor sector. So you basically have a whole bunch of diamonds you get, and then your yield in terms of usability is actually quite low. So a lot of times, a lot of researchers and scientists and engineers, they spend a lot of time just trying to find the right diamond in order to progress it forward. What you see in semiconductor sector is that was where semiconductor was in 1940s and 1950s, but now the supply chain is so efficient. You have these silicon, before it goes to TSMC, out of Shinetsu, they produce these very, very high purity silicon wafers, and then it gets sliced before it then gets tested, characterized before we basically start doing the fabrication process. That's where diamond needs to be as well. So a lot of our intellectual property and process that we've developed has really been about that start to all the way to the end, which is you've got to make sure you have a high purity diamond before you can start various proprietary processing steps to get you to something that is a higher performing quantum sensor diamond or quantum computing diamond, which the quantum computing diamond requires lithography techniques that we have invented, but a lot of lithography techniques that we develop can actually be used to improve the sensitivity of quantum diamond as well.
That's really cool. And Brian, I want to bring you in here. Like me, you are not a physicist, is that right?
That's right. I'm a
So
double
so
E.
So you do
Yeah,
have some hard engineering background. That's good.
yeah,
I'm sure that prepared you for for some of the challenges in quantum computing. But what was sort of the origin point for you and your fascination with quantum
yeah,
computing?
yeah. So my undergrad is in electrical engineering, and my grad is also electrical engineering. But kind of early on, I was really fascinated with lab to fab and the business of technology. So many great technologies are kind of stuck in the lab, whether it's batteries, and I've been fortunate enough to be CEO of silicon anode battery companies, where we try to get more energy density, innovate, Trilumina, where we try to do like 100 times lower cost LiDAR for autonomous driving, and all the way from Primaria, my first startup, which tried to do really low cost optical fiber to the processor. So I think one of the things that really interests me is there's so many great technologies that use lab techniques to build a prototype that can never be replicated. And when I saw Quantum Brilliance, they were already thinking about how can we start leveraging the huge ecosystem that's already there, right? And so instead of building, a custom whole set of factories and machines to work on diamonds one by one, how can we actually take those diamonds and put it in a form factor like a wafer that can start going in this infrastructure? And so it's all about leveraging, which is what I saw. And this started for me all the way back at a company called TRW, which is now Northrop Grumman, which is an aerospace and defense company. And we built a fab, and we basically got to the point where we were building these super uh, unique circuits for spy satellites and missiles and whatever. And we would change the process to make the chip work well, right? And I did that for 17 years. And then all of a sudden, when I left, it struck me, you don't get to do that. You can't go to TSMC, as Mark brought up, say, hey, you need to change. So So that started getting me thinking, how do we not just have this breakthrough in technology, but how do we do the great engineering work to be able to get it fabricated in super high volumes? What I call democratizing the technology. So my philosophy is some tech breakthroughs that solve a problem in an emerging market, and to boot, how do we democratize that where a lot of people can use it? And if you look at my background, it's with optical datacom, trying to get it really low cost with batteries to leverage existing infrastructure, even though it's a new material. With quantum brilliance, it's very similar. It's how do we get it? It's where it's room temperature, doesn't need a cryo cooler. That really attracted me. Where now all of a sudden, instead of being in a giant room or even a football field size facility, we can get it where it could be on your desk. It could be in the edge application, and so we're really
Well,
looking to
19-inch
democratize.
rack 6U is that is a far cry from any other quantum
Right,
computer that I'm
e-
aware of.
exactly. So it democratizes the technology where more people
Yeah.
can access it. Because I've been in tech for 40 years, right? I've gone through the PC revolution, where good enough and all that. So anyway, so that's what attracted me, and since I've been on 9 boards and been an executive, it's really how can I take, even though I'm not an expert, I'm not a physicist in quantum diamonds, we're starting to say, how can we build a chip? And the other thing is, where in a value chain is the best place for us? You can go all the way from licensing the technology at one end of the spectrum to we're going to build the whole thing, the machine, the IO, the software, the compiler. There's a pretty broad spectrum. And if you look at going back to the PC again, was the best place to be an IBM clone, or is it really where the IP is the highest, like a Wintel, place in the value chain? So that's the other thing is the company, was exploring this, where is the best place in the value chain. When I started getting really interested about 5 or 6 months ago, because it's really hard to double back if you decide to go lower in the value chain and then all of your partner ecosystem now thinks you're a competitor and they really don't want to deal with you. So you got to move pretty carefully and communicate very carefully what your intentions are if you want to do it with a partner ecosystem, which is the last thing that really struck me of the company, is they were aligned with my views of, instead of going it alone, build a partner ecosystem where we're all building and delivering something together, where different partners are great at what they do, but they need something that's impossible to get anywhere else except for from Quantum Brilliance.
Right, right. That makes sense. And, it struck me coming into the quantum computing community. My background is similar to yours. I'm old as well and have been around since the PC revolution and the internet and all of the dawn of time kind of phases of
Yeah.
technology. Um, the the importance of collaboration in sort of transitioning from or coming out of the lab, as you said, out of open science and curiosity driven research into something more applied. And, it also, one of the reasons I've been tracking Quantum Brilliance is because of the really high quality partners you've got. I mean, you've got Oak Ridge, you've got Fraunhofer, you've got Pawsey in Australia. These are all really leading research institutions on a global scale. Mark, is that something that you see as on the critical path to continuing to develop this technology? Is those types of working partnerships?
Yeah, I think over the next 1 or 2 years, you'll see more partnership, where we'll be working with different beneficiaries of our sensing technology, in a combination of industrial sensing and defense side of
Commercial partners,
commercial partner.
yeah, that we can't really name at this point, but Mark says, yeah.
And I think the thing from us is, if you want to develop a technology that can be produced at scale, then it is quite important to work with your commercial partners to define these requirements now rather than later, because that really allows you to have a more effective route towards understanding exactly what are the fabrication as well as engineering pathways and specifications, so you can actually solve problems with more precision. Whereas when you're trying to build something that solves problems for everyone, then it really changes the calculus about how you go about solving problems. So that level of focus and those partners with Palsy, Oak Ridge National Lab, and Fraunhofer, these are extraordinarily rare because these folks have so much industry experience and so much understanding about what the technology needs to do to solve what problems. And that really helps us actually refine the technology so it becomes truly useful. That's
Hmm.
how we go about approaching our route to market.
Yeah, not only useful but easy to use, I think is really important. I've come in as the first CEO of a company early on, the second, and then the third. And the reason why there was a second and third is the technology was great, but really hard to use. Like when digital power came along, or something that's brand new from analog, eh, the engineers that were used to working with power, that when I was in a company, didn't know Z transforms, and they wanted a graphical user interface with knobs, right? And that unlocked thousands and thousands of users. And so I think what Quantum Brilliance is going to be focused on, in addition to great technologies, how do we get it easy enough to use, as Mark said, in a form and with all the tools necessary so that I can actually go into the next level of assembly, and go to market. If they don't sell and find it easy to incorporate our technology, it's not going to ramp in the volume. And so
And when
those are
you're talking
challenges.
about incorporating your technology, are you thinking more, at least in the near term, in terms of sensing applications where you may provide a sensing technology that's part of a larger system or product?
Yeah, that's correct. So on the sensing side
Yeah.
of things, it's about having our chip technology be integrated into a bigger system. And sometimes that means that you need to interact with, for example, different type of sensors, different type of workflow, for example, navigation system and platforms. But even on the computing side, it's actually quite critical. So our quantum computer that we deployed at National Labs, our quantum chip is located right next to NVIDIA GPU, which is closely integrated. And part of that thinking is we believe one of the critical evolutions for the future of supercomputing is to have a hybrid node. And that hybrid
Okay.
node is to have a QPU, a CPU, and a GPU deeply integrated, which is quite common in how compute architecture works today. You don't really have a GPU sitting somewhere far away in a separate facility that is connected to
Right.
a data center. It really needs to be deeply integrated, and we're pioneering that in order to achieve that integration.
Yeah, how do you
And
use
do you
complementary?
see?
Sorry,
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I would
Go
just
ahead.
say, how do you use complementary technologies to deliver a solution instead of being maybe dogmatic about every aspect has to be solved with quantum.
Right.
I think that's
Right.
the right attitude.
Yeah, and you use the word complementary. I was curious, do you see sensing as a complementary application to computing for the technology you're developing, or is it sort of a hedge? Like, in case computing doesn't work out, you've got a solid sensing technology that you can fall back on.
That's a really good question. The way we look at it is slightly different, which is computing will definitely come. However, when you actually think about how we think about the market of the future, um, semiconductor history has been littered with examples where, because the switching cost is quite low, so whoever comes up with a better performing chip that is more cost effective and more energy effective, people flip over. Now, the way we think about this is that by building the sensing chip, that actually creates the conditions of the value chain to result in a high volume, low cost production outcome. And so when you think about that quantum device in sensing, that drives the pressure to get you to a more cost-effective quantum computing chip anyway. So from our perspective, we look at it from a value chain perspective, which is sensing is about volume and price, and that naturally leads to a cost-effective quantum computing chip solution within the next decade. In the meantime, we're still part of the computing evolution and revolution, and all the dollars that 50 or 100 companies are spending in quantum computing, ecosystem development, algorithm, application integration, that will benefit us as we come up with a chip that is cost effective and low energy and small and can be deployed anywhere.
That's really cool. And Brian, I mean, I'm guessing you've never, as much as you've been in emerging technology areas, you've never seen something as bleeding edge as quantum computing
No.
before. It's in. I like to joke. It's sort of like we've reset the clock to like 1948 or something, right? It's kind of extraordinary. But does that? I mean, on the one hand, you've already talked about a lot of the lessons you've learned that are applicable here in terms of bringing the business discipline about how to take something out of the lab and turn it into a marketable technology. Are there things about this super early stage that are worrisome? I mean, obviously the lack of need for a big dilution refrigerator is great, but then there's also, I mean, all of these modalities have their own pros and cons. Are there things that sort of keep you up at night in terms of the risks of this modality or of quantum computing as a whole, since it's so early stage?
Yeah, that's right. This is probably one of the more bleeding edge. I mean, I've been on the board of AI companies, but that's pretty well known, and the market is there. Um, and I've actually interviewed for a fusion energy company, and one of the things that struck me was their first demo was like 10 years away, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm used to VCs and investors, wanting to see some core milestones. So I think one of the risks of, hey, give us money in whatever technology space is bleeding edge, and we're gonna, go in a room with a bunch of PhDs and emerge 10 years later with a fantastic solution, is the practicalities of hitting milestones that keep the company well funded enough to do and execute what you need to do. So obviously, operationally, one of the things is how can you be as effective as possible with the money you raise and punch above your weight. But there's not too many people that are doing what we're doing, to your point, right? So there's always technology risks. And so when we bring up the sensing, I think I look at it less of a hedge, but as a proof point that we're probably going to be one of the first quantum device companies to be able to really not just do a demo, but get a product out in quantum sensing. And I think it does everything that Mark just mentioned, but it also de-risks our path to
Right.
get there, right?
That
And
revenue stream would be awfully nice.
yes, yes, the revenue stream is not only to offset, the expenses that we're plowing into computing, but to show the community that
That's right.
quantum devices are real, right?
Right.
Um, not that
I
fusion
imagine you
will
always
happen.
get more patience from investors when they can see the proof in that you can bring part of your technology is already in the market and it's already starting to make money. That's bound to buy some goodwill.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've raised like over 200 million in equity for all my companies, and the way to do that is to be able to show them where we're going to go and where it's going to be, but to offer some pretty meaty, tangible proof points along the way. And if you can monetize that, like we are going to do, that's even better.
That's amazing. And Mark, so you mentioned the device you're going to be deploying at Oak Ridge. I think you already have a device at Pawsey, and I can't. Is there a device at Fraunhofer, or is that still planned?
Both in Fraunhofer and Oak Ridge National Lab, all these devices have been deployed already.
Oh, they have. Okay. And how many qubits are in each device?
So all the devices, so Oak Ridge National Labs combined has 6 physical qubits. Fraunhofer has
Okay.
2, and Oak Ridge has 2 as well. Oh, sorry,
Right.
Pawsey has
And
2.
pause, yes, too, yeah. So the small number of qubits is because you're at that sort of prototyping or testing the modality phase. What does the sort of scaling roadmap look like for you? When do you get to sort of the either the NISC sort of era of 50 to 100 qubits, or even I think Preskel's trying to call it the mega quap era, is sort of early fault tolerance with tens of logical qubits, that kind of scale.
Yeah, so when we look at it, our our current roadmap is looking at 2028, 2029 is where we will be able to have enough useful qubits to do what we call application specific quantum computing. ASIC is a new term that we're trying to establish.
Great.
Interesting.
it's I've complained to John about megaquap. ASIC sounds way better than that. So.
Uh, and then our route to fault tolerant quantum computing, we're currently looking at 2034, 2035. And the way we're looking at it is we think at that lunchbox size form factor with about 50 to 60 logical qubits, you will be able to do useful tasks that is just simply not possible
Right.
unless you get to that very small form factor.
Right, right. And I guess as I said, I alluded to sort of all of the modalities have their pros and cons. You already addressed sort of the precision of placing the vacancies, which I think was one of the hurdles for NV centers. What about operational speed? I mean, you compare superconducting or spin qubits with atom-based neutral atom or trapped ion, and speed is quite an issue. I believe that's similar in another, diamond qubits, because they're another physical system. Is that true?
Yeah, so when you look at, say, diamond qubits, I think the interesting part about this technology is that it sort of sits right in the middle across all modalities when it comes to both coherence time as well as speed as well. And so, as you will know, from a speed perspective, the fastest will be superconducting, and then you'd have trap ion on the other side, which is extraordinarily is one of the slowest in the system modalities. Whereas diamond and V sits right in the middle between these. When you look at, say, coherence time, superconducting has much slower coherence time and trap ions much faster. Again, diamond and V actually sits right in the middle as well. Um, and so from a trade-off perspective, what you're looking at is you have about average coherence time, you have about average speed, but your main differentiator is that deployment mode, because what you're really looking at is having what we call more compute density per volume. And that means that you can achieve extreme miniaturization with our system. And naturally, with that comes low energy consumption costs. So, because nitrogen vacant systems are, they sit there as solid state qubits, you don't need active lasers or active cooling to do that. So, we're really looking at about 300 watts, if not lower, as opposed to tens of kilowatts or even 15 megawatts. So this becomes the other core advantage as well.
Scalability, I think, is the key here. I mean, well, even before my time, that we had vacuum tubes, and they were substantially ahead of any kind of semiconductor. I mean, they could do maybe one transistor or two, but at the time, you could do a whole computer with vacuum tubes, and that got to market faster, right? And you would say, wow, I don't know if these transistors are gonna, you know, ever be enough, transistors to match a vacuum tube system. But the acceleration once you get to a scalability technology is immense. And I think that's one thing that we have that attracted me to join as chairman here, is that it's just so scalable once we get this technology down, we can get into larger scale wafers, we can get more and more logical qubits, and at the place in the value chain that we have, we can actually go to market in a really efficient manner. And that's exciting, right? To be able to scale this very rapidly. As Mark says, we don't need lasers in free space or cryo coolers, and our manufacturing process should be very scalable if we do it that we are planning.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been super interesting. I really appreciate your time. I'm glad I know more about what Quantum Brilliance is doing now, and it really does. I mean, it's a very credible story around scalability and usability. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what comes next. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sebastian.
Yes, thanks, Sebastian.
All right. Thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast, a production of the New Quantum Era, hosted by me, Sebastian Hassinger, with theme music by OCH. You can find past episodes on www.newquantumera.com or on Blue Sky at newquantumera.com. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and tell your quantum curious friends to give it a listen.